Hey everybody, welcome to Pop Culture Philosophers. It's time for Comics Revisited. Today we're revisiting 1993's X-Men Fatal Attractions. That's right everybody, thanks for checking out the video. I'm Rockin' Robbie Billups. This is...
Brooks,
the Magnificent. And we are going to be talking about Fatal Attractions. That's right, the X-Men storyline from 1993 here on Comics Revisited. Fatal Attractions. 1993 was the 30th anniversary of the X-Men, Brooks. And another thing that's really cool about Fatal Attractions, which is available in this trade paperback. Actually, now it's in a X-Men Milestones trade paperback. Since Hickman started the X-Men stuff, they've got this really badass new trade paperback collection of the most important X-Men stories, and they kind of nail it. Days of Future Past, Dark Phoenix Saga, Mutant Massacre, Executioner Song, Fatal Attractions, Onslaught. There's finally going to be an Onslaught in one trade paperback coming out this year. Anyway, Fatal Attractions, we'll throw links down below to various omnibus hardcover and trade paperback editions you can buy. And of course, we got single issues over here. 30th anniversary of the X-Men, and also what's really cool about it is me and Brooks were 12 years old when these books came out, and we were both there. We read them at the time, right?
Well, I got mine a little later.
Did you?
Yeah, because I had to order them through the mail, pretty much.
Oh man, why?
Because at the time, my parents wouldn't take me to the comic shop on a regular basis, so I had to get my comics either off the rack at Walmart or the supermarket, or I'd order them through the mail.
And these just... Oh yeah, I was crazy. I had a box at Jennings when these came out. It's old school Huntsville, Alabama comic book
It was
stuff.
the biggest. It was the second biggest comic shop in Alabama.
Oh man, it was huge. And when I was a kid, a teenager, it was awesome. So 12 for me, because I read these. Well, I didn't read them all. I read the X-Force one. I read the X-Men one. I read the Wolverine one. And I got the Excalibur one, and I thought, how boring at the time when I was a kid, right? So we're going to go through these books. We're going to revisit them, relive them, talk about the story, the art, the themes, and all that kind of stuff. And we're going to have a lot of fun here. So if you want to get into X-Men Fatal Attractions, that's what we're about to do. Needless to say, even though Brooks kind of got into it just a little bit later, it was of the time. Yeah. We were there. It was an important story.
The first comic book I ever got was this right here. Is Uncanny 300, and this was
That's
a precursor.
First comic book ever bought.
It's a lead-in, pretty much a precursor to Fatal Attractions, which I didn't realize at the time. When I first got it, I was I just loved it, even though I didn't understand half what was going on.
Yeah,
But
that's your first one.
Yeah, wow. It's in pretty bad shape, man. I've read it a lot of times.
No, as it should be, Brooks.
Yeah, the spine's starting to come.
John Romita Jr. artwork. You got Nightcrawler on the first page. Oh my goodness.
I love that shot of him teleporting in.
Heck yeah. Oh, and the ad for Fire in the Sky.
I love this little buckle gun that Ford shoots him with. I thought, man, that's weird. And the fact that he's his outline is still there.
Now, Brooks is taking it back right here. His very first comic book was a prelude to Fatal Attractions, which is collected in these collected editions. So, a little bit of backstory on Fatal Attractions. We all know who the X-Men are and Xavier and whatnot. We know who Magneto is, right? So, in X-Men 1 through 3, written by Claremont and artwork by Jim Lee, right? Mutant Genesis, whatever you want to call it. Magneto comes back. Most of the later half of the 80s, Magneto was kind of a good guy.
At this time, he wasn't a good guy. He was just basically, he'd removed himself from the world, I guess there's something... He was the leader of the New Mutants for a while, but then Cable comes in and basically takes him, turns him into X-Force.
Yep. So that's when he wore the purple costume with the big M.
Yeah. And so basically he's in self-exile. So before these astronauts come and, fuck it up, and that's where the Acolytes...
Yeah, so in X-Men 1 through 3, which was such a big deal, they sold millions of copies and all that stuff. The Acolytes, Magneto back to his villainous roots. Chris Claremont leaves the X-Men. He leaves the X-Men in the tender care of writers like Scott Lobdell and Fabian Nicieza. I've met Fabian Nicieza. Super cool dude. Co-creator of The New Warriors with Mark Bagley. Co-creator of Deadpool. I guess that's probably more important to other people, right?
Yeah.
But for me, not so much. Anyway, what he did to Night Thrasher, oh my goodness. He just... I've already told Fabian what I feel about his work on Night Thrasher, and it's amazing.
I'd like to read some New Warriors.
I should let you have the issue. I have like pretty much the full run.
Yeah,
I got some things I got to fill in.
For checking those out,
dude. It's really great stuff. But alas,
we're getting off track a little bit.
Alas, earwax. Anyway, so Fatal Attractions is set up because Magneto is back in his villainous role, and he's been gone for a while. He's actually been supposedly dead since the end of X-Men #3.
Yeah,
we find out that Fabian Cortez, kind of the leader of the Acolytes, who has the mutant ability to enhance other mutants' powers. He had been boosting and bolstering Magneto's powers because he was kind of weakening. He kind of boosted him up a little bit. He actually is responsible for the death of Magneto.
Yeah, because of the upstarts.
The upstarts.
The fucking upstarts.
Like a really cool, like, supervillain yuppie collective from the 90s.
And their whole thing is to impress this dude called Games Master.
Yeah, like, who cares?
It's like... The game, like, did anything ever become of Game Master?
I barely even remember. The upstarts, there was Trevor Fitzroy.
He was the guy from the future that
Bishop's guy, yeah. And he had a cool action figure with the crystal armor.
He had the
crystal
helmet.
armor, yeah. And then there was
Creed, Graydon Creed.
There was somebody from the Hellfire Club, wasn't there?
Shinobi. Shinobi Shaw.
Yeah, the guy who was just recently featured in Marauders.
He got in by killing his father.
The Black Bishop now.
Yeah.
He's the Black Bishop, yeah. And anyway, the upstarts really have nothing to do with Fatal Attractions. Anyway, Fabian Cortez...
Well,
that's the reason.
Only the precursor.
That's one of his things he does to impress the upstarts.
Yeah, they do kind of like throw in like bits of Graydon Creed here and there.
Yeah.
Not Fitzroy, but mostly Creed and Cortez.
Yeah, a little bit. And then you have, because of the Bishop, right? Anyway, so then you have the idea of Executioner's Song. It ended with Sinister releasing unknowingly to him, I think. I remember that he didn't really...
Yeah, it was
Strife had made this
Strife
disease.
had like kind of this plan, I guess a backup plan for if he failed.
Yeah.
That would basically end up being the legacy virus.
And Sinister puts it out. The legacy virus hit. So if you read the X-Men comics in the mid to late 90s, you know all about the legacy virus because that's all it was about.
It went on for a while.
Yeah, and it killed Ileana.
It's kind of like the Spider-Man clone saga of the X-Men.
It really was. And they ended it in a very weird way. But anyway, and very suddenly. But anyway, the first victim was Ileana. Ileana, right? Rasputin, Colossus' sister. So Colossus is questioning his involvement with the X-Men. Magic dies, right? And I forgot that she had been de-aged again to a kid.
It's like she's got this weird, complicated backstory. Like, one of these days I'd like to read New Mutants.
They got those epic collections. Maybe you should check them out.
I'd be
really cool stuff. The movies is coming out. These trade paperbacks and collected editions, by the way, do have all that stuff in here. What was it? X-Men 303 or 4? The most important comic you'll read this year, whatever it was.
Jubilee and Jean
Jubilee and Jean. It's like if you read one comic book, this must be it. It's the death of Ileana.
Yeah.
That's how you say her name, right?
I assume so.
Ileana?
And in the cartoon, he's like, Ileana.
Yeah, that makes more sense. That makes sense. Ileana. I think I watched that New Mutants trailer, the new one, and I think that
I haven't seen that
their
yet.
Pronunciation of it kind of threw me off for this video. Anyway, so that sets all this up. That's actually a very powerful issue. It's a little after-school special. It's a little forced, but I remember being 12 years old reading that and being like... Because I bought it. On the cover it says this, if you read one comic this year, like one X-Men comic or whatever it is, it should be this one. And I read it and I was just like... It's like when Charlie Brown had that friend that died.
Yeah, I knew nothing about Ileana at the time.
Yeah, me neither.
I was like, oh man, a little girl died.
Yeah. I was like, Colossus' sister. Yeah, So Colossus is all... There you go. Enter Fatal Attractions. Basically, the whole point of Fatal Attractions is the return of Magneto. He's not dead. He's just been hiding away in Antarctica. He had a brief appearance in X-Men Unlimited #1, but they never really showed him. He doesn't really show up till X-Force #25. So the first issue of Fatal Attractions, and what's really cool about Fatal Attractions, Brooks, is that it's not one big connected story like they had just done with Executioner's Song, right? It was basically self-contained stories that all kind of dealt with the same theme and some of the same ideas. The Acolytes, Magneto returning, Colossus's betrayal after the death of his sister, and things like that, right? And then, of course, what happens to Wolverine. And by the way, maybe we should have said this in the beginning so we didn't lose viewers, but this is the story where Wolverine gets his adamantium ripped out of off of his skeleton by Magneto.
That's hardly even like what I consider the best part, though.
But it's the most remembered part, for sure.
Like, there are parts that I think are more memorable.
Yeah, and this book has lasting ramifications, so let's get right into it. It starts with X Factor number 92, in which the Acolytes, and Brooks has got the nice hologram covers.
Looks like his blaster coming right at your face.
Yeah, no kidding. Those are amazing covers, and I love these holograms and the way they had to do it. So they each have an artist that drew an image, right? And then someone would take that image and they would make a 3-dimensional model of it. Then they put in this, and you saw the picture, this crazy laser Polaroid contraption that weighed 2 tons and was like secured from any kind of vibration whatsoever. And it would take these like laser images of this model, and then they would turn that into the hologram. It's a very complex process.
Lasers, man.
Somebody on Facebook was like, in the PCP Army, they were like, did they ever do hologram covers like these? I was like, never like these.
Yeah.
Because none of the other hologram covers you've ever seen look like those. Yeah. That's a really long, arduous, and expensive process that they went through to make that. Marvel in the 90s, by the way, was like this. Yeah! We're selling millions of comics for life.
That's kind of the whole reason like gimmick covers kind of became less of a thing, because they overdid it so much.
Oh, they really did. But these are still, they hold up. Yeah. And there's some that if they've been exposed to sun, they kind of dull out, but those are sharp. Anyway, X Factor 92, my first introduction to the character of Random, which I love. Random, I think he's so cool. He turns into his fists into whatever's.
I guess he's kind of like a shapeshifter in a way.
Yeah, he can turn his fists and hands into guns.
I think he has like energy blasts he can use or something.
Yeah, that's what he does. He turns them into guns and he shoots energy blasts. You remember the action figure?
Yeah.
He shot out the missiles? Yeah, it was dope stuff. Anyway, so in this one, the Acolytes, Magneto's not back yet. The Acolytes are basically slaughtering humans, and they meet up with Quicksilver, because Quicksilver's in the X Factor right now, and they offer him leadership of the Acolytes because he's the son of Magneto. What do you think about that one?
I like this issue of X Factor a lot. I wasn't as familiar with the X Factor team, but I like it. I like him. I like Quicksilver, how arrogant he is.
Yeah.
Like I love when the
Acolyte
like bows down to him, and like Strong Guy's like, "Wow, Pietro, after all this time of," I guess it's something like something about him wishing people that he was a god, and now he's
Such a great issue. The artwork is done by Joe Quesada, and I think it's actually one of the better artistic. Yeah, this is Joe Quesada. And Peter David was the typical X Factor writer, but Scott Lobdell was actually the co-plotter on this. J.M. DeMatteis did the script. It seemed like Peter David didn't really want to be too involved in that. Yeah. But it's a really fun story, and basically what happens is they offer the leadership role to Quicksilver. He tells them no. They slaughter like hundreds of humans. They go after... It gets revealed that the government has got this Sentinel program that they're doing, and Val Cooper, who is the government liaison with X Factor, knew about it and never told Alex and the rest of them, right? So then they get pissed, and that is the lasting ramification that Fatal Attractions deals to X Factor, is that they basically get rid of Val Cooper, and from this point forward, Forge becomes their government liaison, and that was really fun stuff.
And we can't forget Exodus's appearance.
Oh, Exodus's first appearance is in
when
this.
They're on their way to basically they're basically traced Valerie, and they're following her against orders, and like on the way, like
he just
Exodus shows up. He's just like, he kind of looks at him, and then he just goes off.
Yeah, on the revisit,
he's all mysterious and shit.
On the revisit, I was like, was that his first appearance? And I looked it up, and confirmed first appearance, Exodus X Factor Volume 1, number 92 from 1993. And rumors are saying that Disney has the rights back to the X-Men, and Exodus is a mutant character. So maybe one day he'll be in a movie. So right now, X Factor 92, y'all should get it up. We're just kidding. We're just playing.
Can't have mine, though.
X Factor's okay, but it gets easily forgotten in the hole that is Fatal Attractions. Yeah. And probably
it's kind of the start, and it doesn't really... It's kind of loose. It's more about the Acolytes. It's not about Magneto, you know?
It's all set up.
It's kind of like,
And these books didn't come out one after the other. These were over a period of 5 months. Yeah. So they were like... The books just kept going. And other books would allude to some things that were going on. Uncanny X-Men, X Factor. There are other things that are around these issues. But... I would say the X Factor, which is the opening, and then Excalibur, which is the ending. Those are the two weakest ones.
Yeah.
Just because they're basically a prelude and an epilogue. Yeah. basically.
Pretty much.
Any final thoughts on the X Factor one before we move on? Because I interrupted you and I feel terrible about it.
I can't even remember.
I know. I knew that was going to happen. You're like, whatever I was going to say.
Dissipated, man.
It's lost. We'll never get it again. X-Force number 25 was the next bit. After the end of Executioner's Song, Cable and Strife had disappeared into the time stream. Cannonball had been leading the X-Force since that moment. Cable comes back in this issue. It's got artwork.
The Return of Cable.
It's got artwork by Fabian. It's got artwork by Greg Capullo. Which is not quite, it's not quite the Greg Capullo that I think his best stuff is what he's doing now.
It's a little rough.
But it's solid. Look at that Cable right there. It's good. Fabian Nicieza was the writer on this one.
Yep.
This one's pretty good because everybody always remembers that Wolverine got completely effed up by Magneto. Mm-hmm. But hardly anybody remembers that Cable got messed up. Right? So Cable comes back. He resumes leadership. He's got this issue with Cannonball. There are these two characters that were brainwashed by Strife that joined.
Skids.
Yeah, and they joined the Acolytes. And then basically what happens is Magneto has built Avalon. Magneto reappears, by the way, in this issue, fully on.
Yeah.
Magneto shows up.
It finally shows him.
Yeah, he's got this space station called Avalon in which he's going to invite mutants to live with him. They invite They invite the X-Force mutants there.
Jeez.
Yeah, and they completely... So... Cable gets X-Force away, and he tells Sam, Cannonball, you have taught me a lot about being a better person and being a better leader. Yeah. And so this is a whole new vibe. Like, if you didn't like the Liefeld Cable and X-Force, don't worry, because from this point forward, it goes a little bit different.
It kind of started that in the Executioner Song. It was about Cable having to, deal with something. Like, Cable's big problem was Strife.
Yeah.
And, him defeating Strife had consequences. And, X-Forces being, on the run was kind of one of those consequences. Like he'd left him high and dry in a way.
Yeah.
But now he's coming back, and of course, Sam's got to test him a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So Cable gets all the rest of X-Force away, then tries to confront Magneto on his own because it turns out that Avalon is made from parts of his space thing.
Yeah,
Gray Malkin. It's got the AI, the professor in there. He gets the professor out of there, but Magneto completely just shreds all the metal in Cable's body.
He just leaves half of him just a lump.
Weird. I don't even know how Cable is standing in the last... He shows up in Excalibur. Yeah. He shows up in Excalibur.
And he's fine.
And you're like, what just... And he's like, well, Magneto did mess me up, so I gotta... Dude, you got messed up. How are you still... Wolverine's dying for months over what happened to him.
I can only assume he, telekinetically repaired himself.
Well, I think the computer program did something too, maybe. I don't know. There's probably something that happened to X-Force number 26, but I've never read that one. Maybe I should.
I love this shot of him standing over here. It's like, how are you still alive?
Even Magneto's like, what's going on? Fabian, this is inconsistent. So anyway, we'll move on to Uncanny X-Men 305, and that's the funeral of Ileana.
Magneto.
Of Magic. Yeah, Magneto returns to makes himself fully known to the X-Men. Not a lot happens in this. It is a funeral issue. That's why they put all the death of Ileana in this stuff, because
it's a lot of talking.
Yeah, and once Magneto comes back, by the way, they totally turn on Fabian, and they kick out Fabian in this issue. Yeah. Shadowcat comes back because the funeral. She comes back actually when Ileana's dying. Look at that ad for
Nightmare Before Christmas.
Oh, look at that! Look at that ad for Nightmare Before Christmas. Man, I think that's going to be something. I think it's going to be something. John Romita Jr. did the artwork in that.
It's very inconsistent. There's a lot of different
artists in there, actually, yeah.
So it's kind of like, I remember when I was a kid reading, I was like, what the hell is going on with the art? Why does it keep changing like that?
Yeah.
The styles are pretty drastically different.
They really are. It makes it a very inconsistent read. Yeah, because Chris Sprouse looks like he did some of that, maybe.
None of that I would say was bad, but I just wish it was more,
Yeah. Another thing about the artwork in these is that in every single one of these issues, dude, except for that X-Men 25, I think, maybe in that one too, there's a damn centerfold. And me and Brooks hate the damn centerfold idea.
I hate those 2-page spreads.
Where you have to turn the book over like this to read it. I can't stand it. I hate it.
And they used to do it all the fucking time.
God, do they reprint them in those giant omnibuses like that? Could you imagine trying to take a 20-pound giant omnibus and stretching out the spine? It's terrible. I hate it. I hate those. But aside from that stuff, it's still pretty cool. But nothing happens in the Uncanny X-Men. It's just a funeral. Magneto shows up, talks a little bit of shit.
Colossus
and then
Colossus,
Colossus leaves. Well, how did that affect you when you first read it?
It was bizarre because I was so early in the X-Men, and like I didn't really know Colossus as much, but I always saw him as like one of the more loyal X-Men, And I
he's a Hufflepuff. Yeah,
I know he went way back to when the first new team with like Wolverine and Sunfire, and Storm, Nightcrawler,
Sunfire, by the way, has a brief appearance in X-Men 25, and
he was in the arcade game too.
I thought he was dead forever. X-Men 25, Sunfire shows up when he hits the MP pulse. So yeah, basically what happens at the end of this is Magneto leaves with Colossus because he's gone through a lot of stuff. He's got a head injury that may be affecting him.
His brother had there was like
they just had to kill his brother.
Mikhail had killed himself.
Yeah,
in like some kind of attempt to transport the Morlocks somewhere.
He lost his brother, his sister.
Yeah, he's like
got his head messed up.
He lost everybody. I think his parents had died.
Yeah. His parents had just recently died too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Illyana was all he had left, is what he said.
Peter's story is the heart of this story, and it's the heartbreaking to me, like absolutely crazy. But what this does is it sets up brilliantly X-Men number 25. Because X-Men number 25 by Andy Kubert and Fabian Nicieza.
Gambit.
With the Gambit hologram. Hold it up a little bit more so they can see. Yeah, look at that. It still pops and shines. Yeah. Ooh. Ooh, and those and their wraparound covers too.
Yeah.
So X-Men 25 is the big daddy. In fact, you can completely understand the entirety of Fatal Attractions by just reading this one issue.
This is the big one.
The big issue. This is it. Fabian Nicieza, Andy Kubert, they just knocked this one out of the park. I loved this issue so much. I read it over and over and over again. I think out of all the artists, Andy Kubert was my favorite X-Men artist back then. He's got these moments where he's got these like dynamic bits and then very like, because his father was an old school comic book artist, Joe. So he taught Andy and his brother Adam, who does the next issue of Wolverine, he taught them the method of comic book storytelling. So this is like, I have some criticisms from some of the early 90s comic book art.
Yeah.
It's all about flash and centerfolds, pinups. But can you tell a story? John Romita Jr. could tell a story. And the Kuberts could tell a story because their father taught them how to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, he actually had a whole school.
Yeah, the Joe Kubert school.
You know
I remember.
I
think there might be.
They still are. Yeah, they might be, and there still are ads. And I think Andy and Adam help run it now. I think I'm not completely sure. I like the Pizza Hut ads. Yeah. Pizza Hut and the X-Men in the early '90s, by the way.
Yeah, this is where they got the tapes.
Yeah,
that's where I had got Night of the Sentinels from. Yeah.
Oh, that was good. Yeah, the tapes and the pizza boxes. Man, I bet.
I had the interview with Stan Lee and Fabian.
Fabian, Scott, and Bob Harris, right?
Bob Harris,
the editor supreme. Anyway, so in X-Men number 25, the government responds to Magneto's reemergence and his offer to bring all the mutants away, and then the legacy virus is going on. There's all kinds of crazy tension going on in the X-Men universe. They set about the Magneto protocols. They activate a series of satellites that cause this like electromagnetic disturbance around Earth, that if Magneto's on Earth, he can't use his powers. Yeah. Well, he's not on Earth. And so he uses his powers and does a globe-wide EMP, electromagnetic pulse, that wipes out all electronic devices except for the X-Men Shi'ar technology, apparently, and some other spots here and there.
Yeah, I'm sure Reed Richards had power in the back they're building up.
Yeah, I'm sure. Right?
I'm sure Avengers Tower eventually
big deal. Wipes out all the power. The X-Men get sent after him. Xavier has a very particular team. There's Gambit. There's Wolverine. There's him and Jean. Who else was there? Cyclops wasn't there.
Let's see. They had the strike teams. Rogue was there.
Rogue and... was it Psylocke? It wasn't
Psylocke. Wasn't there. Quicksilver.
It's Quicksilver. That's right. It's Quicksilver. Tying in back. Yeah. Really cool. So he has this team. He also is using this... This device that he operates with his mind so he can walk.
Yeah, like an exoskeleton.
Yeah, an exoskeleton he can walk. And I remember thinking that was so badass.
Yeah, it's like, oh, he's going to walk.
So badass. And I was like, why did he never use that again?
Apparently it uses a lot. It takes a lot out of him or something.
So they go after Magneto and the Acolytes. They eventually confront Magneto. They kind of never get the upper hand. And then Wolverine cuts the hell out of Magneto. And Magneto just does like, you know what? Whatever. rips
the little tug, like
yeah,
you know,
just a little
just
tug.
like a little bit coming out, and then like the next panel. Oh my god!
Yeah, and look at the sound effect.
God.
Look at the sound effect. Rips out the adamantium that's bonded to Wolverine's skeleton. Oh my goodness. This issue had such an effect on me, Brooks. What about you when you first read this?
This is my favorite, hands down, no doubt. I mean, I love it. I mean, this is the Fatal Attractions issue.
Right? And the whole thing of Fatal Attractions is it's really getting deep into the psyche of Xavier. Xavier realizes...
And setting up, future events.
Yeah, and Xavier is always... he realizes, I've always known how to stop Magneto, how to stop Eric, but I've never been willing to do it. Well, after Magneto almost kills Wolverine, Xavier does it. He completely mind wipes, takes away all the mind of Magneto. Wipes his mind, and then they dip the F out because Wolverine's dying.
Yeah.
Which leads to Wolverine number 75. Written by Larry Hamill with artwork by Adam Kubert. A different style than Andy. It's got Wolverine, surprisingly. With his adamantium. Anyway, this is the issue where he's in the Blackbird. Bishop comes to get him. They're in the Blackbird. It's falling apart. Jean's trying to keep it together and try to keep Wolverine's body together. Meanwhile, her and Xavier are traveling into his mind, trying to keep him together.
Doing psychic surgery.
Yeah, basically, right? And it's got a great dynamic moment where you think all hope is lost. And they lose cabin pressure. And Jean gets sucked out. And then Wolverine grabs her hand as she and his... Psyche is grabbing his hand, pulling him back from the light towards life, and then he grabs her hand, pulling her away from death. How amazing is that?
Yeah, this is probably my second favorite.
Yeah, this is great.
It has I think the Jean Grey badassery in this issue is really what elevates it for me, because she's holding the plane together while she's doing the psychic surgery with Xavier.
Jean's badass.
It's like. And I was like, when she fell, I was like, oh man, are they actually going to kill her?
Yeah.
They killed her a few issues in an uncanny while back with in the Hellfire Club, but it was, it was a short-lived.
Yeah.
They had killed her.
That's the moment right there.
Yeah.
Such a great, powerful moment. She's pulling him from the light, from death, and he's pulling her from death in two different ways, and it's so beautiful. So beautiful, and I love it. I love Kubert's strong, stylistic artwork. And then it cuts ahead. It's been a couple months. Wolverine is trying to push himself, and then all of a sudden, as if getting his adamantium ripped out wasn't enough, Bone Claws! What was your reaction when you first saw that page? Because I freaked the fuck out, dude.
I was like, oh, finally they're going to, quit bullshitting and give us a reason why he has the claws.
Yeah, it took a long time to get
Wolverine
that.
comics at the time were a lot of nothing stories, basically it's false memories kind of.
Wolverine. Remember Wolverine number 50 with the die cut cover?
It's they're always trying to do, they're always we're going to tell the origin, but we're not going to.
Yeah. And then they did. Yeah. And it's it didn't really affect the popularity or badassery of the character. Because they were always nervous about that. Anyway, he's got bone claws. His healing factor's not quite what it used to be, so he leaves the X-Men. Which is kind of a common thing when you read the X-Men books.
Wolverine kind of comes and goes.
But maybe, was this the first time where he really, definitively left for a long time?
Yeah, because, he was always there, he was always basically
he was always there
call,
in the 80s.
On call as an X-Men.
He was always there in the 80s on that team, right? Always.
There's always...
Even when they were in the Outback, right?
At this point, he's I gotta go out on my own,
Yeah.
He doesn't want to feel like, he's holding the team back.
Yeah. Then it all wraps up in Excalibur number 71. With the Nightcrawler hologram.
Yeah, Nightcrawler.
And a Joe Madureira cover. And showed the back of that cover, the full thing, because it's got that great Colossus in his Acolyte costume. So this one is a nice epilogue. And it's basically Scott, Jean, and Xavier go to Muir Island. And Moira's there with her stuff. And Excalibur's there. And they're setting up a trap. Shadowcat is, against kind of her better judgment, misleading Peter and thinking that she wants to join up with the Acolytes. So Peter comes to visit her.
Well, they think that fixing his head injury will maybe change his mind.
Because Executioner messed up his head in that X-Men Annual number 17. So they want to fix his head, and Xavier's like, look, I know I just did some heinous-ass shit. Wiping Magneto's... But I think Xavier did the right thing. Yeah. I'm sorry. It's that moment Batman finally snaps the Joker's neck. Yeah. And you're like, okay, you just saved thousands of people's lives. You know what I'm saying? I don't know where I stand on... I don't know where I stand on things like capital punishment. But in story, Xavier did the right thing.
Yeah, well, Magneto was like, he was willing to show, what he was willing to do. So Xavier had to step up.
Yeah.
Otherwise, Magneto was going to, a lot of people would die.
Oh, absolutely,
Because Magneto doesn't care at this point.
And that's the crux of this. And before we get to this real quick, so they fool Colossus into thinking that Kitty's going to join the Acolytes. He shows up, they have a little tussle, they force him into this brain surgery.
Yeah. And
little unethical.
Rachel and Cable meet each other. I think,
brother and sister meet for the first time. Yeah. They're still, all the familiarity of the Summers family, we take that for granted nowadays, because in those days, that's their first meeting. Yeah. And she's like, why do I feel attached? Yeah. This Cable understands he's a Summers. Yeah. Right? Yeah, he does. At this point, we know he's a Summers, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the Executioner song, I think.
That's where we got that revealed,
that pretty
right?
much revealed.
Okay. Yeah. So, but it's really cool to see that. And basically what happens is Colossus still agrees. He's like, I'm going to keep my word. I'm going to go back and join the Acolytes. Now Exodus is kind of like the leader. And then in the trade, they have this random issue of Uncanny X-Men from 315 where there's the trial of Neophyte. Yeah. And Colossus there. But it's not the moment, it's not the fall of the Acolytes, which happens a little bit later on. This book... so that's what happens to the Excalibur. But basically what happens is Excalibur decides that they're going to remain on Muir Island because it gets attacked.
It's kind of a team change moment for Excalibur.
Yeah, all the books get changed in the direction because of Fatal Attractions. And you know how they always say this when they do events nowadays, Brooks? They go, things will never be the same.
Yeah.
This was really true about this for a while. Wolverine didn't get his adamantium back till 1999.
It took a while.
Magneto.
I love this shot right here where she has Captain Britain's body
being unpredictable. Yeah. Magneto didn't come back in his evil, villainous Magneto form until 1997 in X-Men 350, right? Uncanny X-Men 350. So this had long-lasting ramifications for all of these books, and it eventually led into. You're getting distracted by the book. It eventually gets led into Onslaught. Mm-hmm. Because Magneto gets his mind wiped by Xavier, a little piece of that survives in Xavier's head, and it eventually blossoms in 1997, 1998, 1996, maybe 96. Maybe 96, into Onslaught, which I love me some Onslaught. Yeah. I love me some Onslaught. I really do.
Onslaught's one of the best 90s stories.
The crux of this story, though, to me, is Xavier coming to grips with this idea. I could have stopped this so long ago. I know what I need to do. Now, he won't kill. He still won't cross certain lines. But from this point forward, we never trust Xavier again. The X-Men never trust Xavier again. It leads into things even like today with what Hickman's doing with the X-Men books.
Even Scott kind of, isn't as sure of him as he used to be.
Yeah. And it's the 90s, so it's extreme and it's gritty and it's getting dark. Mm. But that's a valid thing, I think, to explore. Scott Lobdell, Fabian Nicieza, I think they really did. It seems like Scott gets more into the Xavier
I think Scott's trying to, come into his own as a leader. You know? It's kind of like Xavier's not as necessary, anymore.
But he is, man.
Well,
right?
I don't.
What would the X-Men have done?
Xavier's like the mentor type.
Yeah.
And Scott's going to be he's set up. Xavier's basically setting him up to be the next mutant leader, pretty much.
I get it now. When I said Scott, you thought I meant Scott Summers. I meant Scott Lobdell.
Oh.
Scott Lobdell was trying to. I think Scott Lobdell did a lot with Xavier in these issues.
Yeah.
And he was trying to bring Xavier into this more morally ambiguous part. But it's not, he's not killing, he's not strapping on big shoulder pads and pouches and got a gun or nothing like that. But he's dealing with this idea, and he crosses a line. And once he crosses that line, he's never been able to come back. The Morrison stuff. Mm-hmm. Look at the way Morrison does Xavier and Magneto. That all starts because of Fatal Attractions. Yeah. Those character arcs. Magneto being that villain. Yeah.
But with Magneto, it's not so much, he's dangerous, his powers are dangerous, but it's the effect he has on people.
Yeah.
His charisma, he draws in these powerful mutants, and he gets to, fight and die in his name.
I love the X-Men. You love the X-Men. But to me, the X-Men is the strongest when it's a legitimate, great exploration between Magneto and Xavier. Mm. And they both went a little extreme in this story, right? And all the other X-Men, as badass as they are, and I love Nightcrawler, I love Beast. I love Bishop. I love Wolverine. Scott, not so much, but I do like Scott a lot more now.
Yeah,
Scott Summers.
I didn't like Scott as much in the 90s, but...
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people did.
I've come to respect him a little bit more.
Yeah, me too. He made bad puns in the X-Men animated series. Anyway, it's always the best to me when it's about Xavier and Magneto and their opposing ideas, and the X-Men are kind of just thrown in the middle. You know, and that's one of the reasons why I love Fatal Attractions. Yeah. Is it the strongest X-Men storyline? Probably not, but it's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
It's so much fun. Final thoughts. Let's wrap it up, Brooks. Why do you love this book so much? What does it mean to you?
Well, this is the beginning of the X-Men for me in a way. Like, this is the story that, you know, it wasn't the first full story I'd read. I'd read Executioner Song before, but this is like the one where I've really felt like I'm starting to get, you know, what the X-Men are about.
You started getting to the characters, right?
And like, I've been kind of, you know, sticking with them ever since then. So
heck yeah,
this is an important story to me. So that's why I had to have all the issues of Fatal Attractions. And because I wanted the holograms.
Oh yeah, they're beautiful. I have them all too. I have Fabian
I was
signed
so
my number
fucking.
25.
I was swallowing those gimmick covers down, man.
Oh man, I even have a Secret Defenders run
because my first cover was a gimmick cover.
I know. Well, that's probably why you bought that.
Yeah,
it's a 300.
I got it in an Easter basket.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh man, who bought your parents?
Yep, my parents gave.
God bless Brooks's parents.
And an issue of X-Men Adventures. I can't remember which one it was.
I loved X-Men.
It was the Juggernaut. The Juggernaut.
That's probably like issue 6 or 7.
Yeah,
if I had to
like
guess.
5 or 6 maybe.
5 or 6. It was right around
that
Sabretooth
Wolverine
one. Yeah. Good stuff. Anyway, I think this book had a lasting impact. It really affected X-Men books for a long time. I think it's got some really great moments there, especially with Xavier and Magneto and their opposing forces. But to me, this is the highlight for me in this is the Xavier stuff. Seeing Xavier struggle with this moral line that keeps getting grayer. I absolutely love it. I think it's absolutely a fantastic book. It's got great 90s artwork by some of the best that still produce great work. The Kuberts, Casada. These are great artists. Capullo. You know, this is a Romita Jr. You know, like amazing artists. And the story's just awesome. You know, I like the Fabian bits a little bit more than the Scott Lobdell stuff, but I've always been more of a fan of Nicieza over Lobdell. But I loved this revisit, and I think that Fatal Attraction still holds up, and it's strong. Yeah. I think it's very strong. What do you think of Fatal Attractions? Let us know in the comments down below. Right? Do you have one more thing you wanted to say? You look like you did.
I forgot now.
You're a fool, Charles.
You're a fool, Charles.
Anyway,
they can't even get along with each other.
Let us know in the comments below your recollections on your revisits and reviews of Fatal Attractions, the X-Men 30th anniversary story from 1993. I've been Rockin' Robbie Billups. This has been
Brooks
the Magnificent. And we are Pop Culture Philosophers. Join the PCP Army over at Facebook. Please do like, share, and subscribe. And join us over at popculturephilosophers.com for podcasts. And a whole lot more. Kramer.